3 tasks. That is what one artificial intelligence agent ran end to end. Researched, decided, and acted in real systems while the human only got the report at the finish line. For ordinary people, asking a computer for help stops being a conversation and becomes handing off an entire workflow. The paradox. The more software works alone, the more someone must answer when it fails. This episode maps the shift from chatbot to workflow agent, and what still belongs to human judgment when the machine starts doing the middle. In 2026, the biggest commercial fight in artificial intelligence is no longer the chatbot that answers. It is the agent that executes, and almost nobody draws the line cleanly. The difference looks subtle. It is not. A chatbot is an interlocutor. You ask, it generates text, image, or code, and the ball returns to you. The work is still yours. Gathering context, copying the answer, pasting it into the right system, choosing the next step. A workflow agent, in the definition big tech and research reports now push hardest, is something else. It takes a goal, plans steps, uses tools, acts in systems, and returns an outcome, not only a suggestion. It does not merely talk about the email. It drafts, attaches, schedules, and, in demos that are no longer rare, sends under rules you set once. Stanford HAI, in recent AI Index editions, tracks the jump from systems that generate content to systems that chain actions across tools. This is not magic. It is software with permission to do, and permission to do changes risk, value, and job design in ways chat alone never did. Hold the distinction, reply versus execution. Office automation history already showed what happens when a tool stops being passive, and the next layer is exactly that: climb up the ladder of agency. Wait. The pattern has 3 rungs, and confusing the rung is expensive. Every cognitive automation climbs 3 rungs, and mixing them up is the costliest error in the public conversation. First, the tool. You operate. It multiplies force. The calculator does not choose what to calculate. It multiplies what you typed. Second, the copilot. The machine proposes, drafts, completes, but the signature stays human. You see the draft, edit, approve, still in the loop at every sensitive step. Third, delegation. You set the goal, the limits, and the success criteria, and the machine runs the middle path with less supervision at each step. AI agents are the industry's shove toward that third rung, still incomplete, still failure-prone, still dependent on integration and clear rules. But the product direction has shifted, from helping you write to helping you finish the job. McKinsey work on Gen AI and knowledge work describes larger gains when the technology enters the real company workflow, not only a standalone chat box on the side. David Autor, for decades, mapped how technology polarizes labor. It automates the routine and rewards non-routine high judgment. Agents hit chained cognitive routines, the middle of the ladder, where volume lives. The question left is not whether the tool is smart. It is which rung you place the human on, and who pays if that rung is wrong. History already stress-tested this with a tool that looked innocent: the electronic spreadsheet. Watch what it did to the office. In 1979, VisiCalc landed on the Apple II and became the first killer reason to buy a personal computer, the electronic spreadsheet. Overnight, totaling columns and recalculating scenarios stopped being the craft of armies of bookkeepers and became a click. The naive forecast, the end of accountants. Real history ran the other way. Hand arithmetic vanished. Demand exploded for people who modeled, interpreted, and decided from the numbers. The spreadsheet did not kill financial reasoning. It killed slow arithmetic and multiplied the questions you could afford to ask in a single afternoon. That is the classic office automation pattern. The bottom task falls, top-end complexity rises. ERP, in the decades that followed, did the same for company processes. It knit inventory, finance, and orders into one system, and human value migrated to configuration, exception handling, and governance. AI agents promise the next cut, not only calculating and recording, but walking a flow that once needed a human intern stitching tabs, emails, and sheets into one coherent path. If the spreadsheet analogy holds, the win is not 0 people. It is more throughput, more cognitive work processed per hour, but there is a detail the spreadsheet never had, and it changes the legal and psychological game. The spreadsheet did not send email on its own. Wait. Outsourcing already taught what it means to hand the middle of a flow to another entity. Before the software agent, the world already had outsourced human agents. Call center outsourcing, financial BPO, night shift back offices processing invoices on the other side of the planet. The firm defined the process, transferred execution, and charged SLA, turnaround, quality, cost per ticket. The economic logic was clear: separate core business from repeatable volume. AI agents recreate that logic without time zones and without a classic employment contract. Instead of a badge-wearing vendor, a digital process with an API, a service login, and a task queue. The parallel is powerful and dangerous. Powerful because the mental playbook already exists. Specify the work, measure outcomes, audit samples, escalate what fails. Dangerous because speed and marginal cost fall in a way human BPO never matched. You do not hire another shift. You multiply instances, overnight, across every system that accepts a token. The World Economic Forum, in Future of Jobs editions, has long mapped the tension between task automation and demand for new supervision and process design skills. The Nexialist point is this: agents do not invent delegation. They cheapen and accelerate an organizational form outsourcing already rehearsed. Only in BPO, a human manager sat on the other end of the phone, ready to argue about a ticket. With the agent, the phone rings by itself. That forces a precise description of what a workflow agent actually does when it works. Strip the marketing and a workflow agent in the typical 2025-2026 design is a loop: perceive, plan, act, verify, report. A concrete example: no movie fiction. Goal: prepare a competitor briefing for Monday's meeting. The agent pulls public sources, summarizes, builds a table, generates slides, drops the link in the shared drive, and pings the team channel. In more integrated builds, it opens the CRM, updates status, and books the follow-up without waiting for another handoff. Each step uses a tool: search, spreadsheet, email, calendar, internal system, and the value sits in the chain, not in any single clever sentence. The human stops being the nervous system gluing pieces together and becomes the goal setter and exception reviewer. Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, and Anthropic, in public materials on agentic AI and tool-using assistants, describe that architecture: models that call functions, browsers, code, and connectors. Quality still varies widely. Agents fail on ambiguity, invent steps, stall on permissions, or run the wrong plan with confidence. That matters, and we will treat error and liability. But the product design is no longer better autocomplete. It is complete the mission inside guardrails. For the ordinary office worker, the felt change is simple: less time copy-pasting between tabs, more time deciding whether the result is good enough. The next question is why 2026 became the year that language left the lab and entered every big tech pitch. 2026 is not the year artificial intelligence woke up. It is the year the industry repackaged the promise, from conversation to operation. In keynotes, engineering blogs, and product reports, agentic AI stops being research jargon and becomes a platform layer software that orchestrates tools on behalf of a user or a firm. Microsoft talks about agents woven into office work, Google about assistants that run multi-step flows. OpenAI and Anthropic about models with computer use, tools, and long task horizons without a human at every click. The detail that matters for this channel, this is positioning and product trajectory, not a prophecy of universal adoption by tomorrow morning. Penetration projections vary widely across sectors. McKinsey and WEF scenarios on work and Gen AI diverge in pace and scale, and that is healthy. The future of work is not one straight line or one magic percentage. What looks more solid is the interface shift. Chat still exists, but it is no longer the whole story. The interface becomes a panel of missions, permissions, and auditable results you can show a manager or a regulator. For firms, the pitch is productivity and fewer handoffs across fragmented systems. For knowledge workers, the pitch is ambiguous, less operational friction or less professional territory. Hold the ambiguity, because the next corporate step is not only using AI, it is giving software an operational identity, almost a digital badge with a login and a target. A strange figure is showing up in pilots and corporate speeches, the digital employee, not empty marketing metaphor. It is software with a user account, access roles, spend limits, work queues, and metrics. How many requests closed? At what error rate? In what average time? In other words, login, permissions, and KPIs. That matters because it turns the agent from a clever plug-in into an organizational node with a trail and a scorecard. HR and IT, which once managed people and machines as separate categories, now face a third, automations with operational identity that leave logs and ask for budget. The intern analogy is tempting and incomplete. The intern learns, tires, fails in a human way, and can be promoted or let go after a hard conversation. The agent scales, does not sleep, and fails in a statistical way, confident even when wrong. Firms that treat the agent as just another app underprice governance. Firms that treat it as just another employee overprice autonomy and personality, where there is no moral subject. The sober midpoint, as a projection, is process with a human owner. Someone sets the mandate, someone audits, someone can shut it off. If this map is helping you see Cycle 3, stay with Nexialist Future. We connect technology, work, and law without sliding into hype. Because the real economic shock is not the digital badge. It is the price of spinning up one more, and the risk of spinning up too many. When the marginal cost of a digital intern approaches zero, office economics change shape. Not because cognitive work becomes free. Energy, integration, supervision, and legal risk still cost, and sometimes cost a lot. But because the extra unit of routine task execution becomes cheap enough to move the break-even point for whole categories of work. Work that once never fit the budget, extra reports, compliance sweeps, mass personalization, starts looking too cheap to leave on the table. It is the spreadsheet effect at workflow scale. More questions become economically viable. David Otter described labor market polarization. The middle thins, the poles gain value. Agents push that logic deeper into knowledge work with new force. The middle collect, format, transfer, first draft, reconcile sheets, move status, is exactly agentic territory. The poles: problem framing, negotiation, ethics, formal accountability, contextual creativity, resist more, at least in the moderate scenarios under dispute. Beware magic adoption percentages. Projections vary by sector, country, and data quality, and a single number is almost always a story, not a fate. The durable pattern is prices and incentives. If the hour of execution falls, the organization asks for more execution. And at the same time, it demands another human currency: judgment about what should be done and what must not. The latter rises. Who climbs with it and who loses a rung is the tension of the next block. 3 human roles rise in relative price when execution gets cheap, and none of them is typing faster into a chat box. First, setting goals. An agent without a clear objective is high-speed noise. Whoever frames the problem, the limits, and what counts as success becomes both bottleneck and lever. Second, judgment in context. The real world has exceptions, internal politics, angry clients, and nuances. No standard flow anticipates the gray zone where a clean checklist stops helping. Third, accountability. Someone signs, someone answers to the board, the regulator, the customer, when the outcome is wrong. Office technology history suggests that when machines absorb the middle, value migrates to process design and to the process edges, where the unexpected lives. This is not career advice of the take-this-course kind. These are labor division scenarios in dispute. In a cautious adoption scenario, agents stay in sandboxes, and a human approves each sensitive action. In an aggressive scenario, low-risk actions run alone, and audit is sample-based. In both, scarcity shifts, from raw hands to clarity, from brute speed to criteria. WEF Future of Jobs and McKinsey studies on knowledge work and Gen AI converge on a qualitative idea even when numbers diverge. Orchestration skills and complex problem-solving gain relative weight. But an uglier question also rises, and productivity alone cannot answer it. How far do you trust the access? All of an agent's power sits in access, without a login to email, ERP, the database, the code repo. It is an elegant oracle that only advises. With broad permissions, it is an operator that moves the real world. Firms learn the trade-off fast. More access means more value and a wider blast radius when something goes wrong. A human intern asks for the password, and someone hesitates, asks for a timeline, asks for supervision. A digital employee asks for the same password as a token or API key, and the hesitation should be equal or greater. Because the agent does not look like a person walking into the room, it looks like a productivity button on a dashboard. Information security becomes product design. Least privilege, separated environments, immutable logs, emergency kill switches, human review in red zones. Outsourcing already taught the pain of handing access to outsiders. Agents compress that pain into software that scales overnight. And here I want your sentence, not mine. Would you hand login and password for your systems to a digital employee cheaper than an intern? Yes or no? And why? In one sentence in the comments. The answer exposes the real limit of adoption, not only model capability. It is risk appetite. Keep your answer, because the next chapter is not about the password. It is about the day when, with the right or wrong credentials, the agent fails in a way that truly hurts. Who answers when the agent fails? That is the question law is still learning to say out loud. If software sends the wrong proposal, leaks data, discriminates in a screening, or places an absurd purchase order, the victim does not sue artificial intelligence as a person. They sue the company, the operator, the vendor, the integrator, the chain of humans and contracts behind the screen. Civil and regulatory liability do not vanish because the interface grew more autonomous. They redistribute in still messy ways across that chain. That is why mature agent design insists on audit trails. What was requested, with which tools, which model version, under which policy, at which timestamp. Without that, delegation becomes organized amnesia. In outsourcing history, contracts tried to lock in indemnities and service levels. With agents, the temptation is to say, the model did it, and close the file. Legally, under almost every contemporary regime, that is not enough. The Nexialist point crosses law and economics. If the cost of error is unclear, aggressive adoption exports risk to people who never negotiated the price of the shortcut. Scenarios in dispute. Some project insurance and certification for agentic systems. Others, long regulatory breaks. Others, a race without a net until the first major accident. None of those scenarios is destiny. They are paths. And all of them hit a piece no contract alone resolves: the psychological trust humans place in a machine that sounds competent. Trust in machines is not a switch. It is a habit that forms badly and forms fast. Humans tend to overtrust what speaks with fluency, a bias long known in the psychology of communication and expert systems. The smooth-talking agent inherits that dangerous superpower. It sounds right, acts fast, fails with a face of certainty. On the other side, after a loud failure, trust collapses below the rational level, and the organization rejects even useful automations that would have fit under control. The optimal supervision point is boring and powerful: sampling, checklists, anomaly alarms, and the discipline of not romanticizing software as a soulmate colleague. Workflow colleague, maybe. Soul, no. Spreadsheets also bred blind faith. It is in the sheet, so it must be true, and produced famous disasters of wrong models copied across tabs and departments. Agents amplify the same pattern because they chain actions in real systems, not only cells of calculation. The psychological lens matters as much as the economic one. Without calibrating trust, either you break productivity out of fear, or you accelerate the accident out of haste. Training people to doubt with method becomes an office competence, the way reading a balance sheet or challenging a vendor already was. And if trust is calibratable, mass adoption is not one closed destiny. It is a fan of scenarios in dispute, which pulls us out of hype and onto a real map of uncertainty. Wait, 3 scenarios are enough to think without prophecy. 3 scenarios are enough to think without prophecy, and without assuming your sector lives only one of them. Scenario A. Co-pilot dominant. Agents help, but almost every sensitive action needs human approval. Productivity gains exist. Job redistribution is gradual. Supervision grows as a new function. Scenario B. Selective delegation. Low-risk flows run alone. High-risk stays human. A professional layer of agent orchestrators and continuous audit emerges. Knowledge work polarization deepens as Autor warned in earlier waves. Scenario C. Race without a net. Firms open wide permissions in a rush for competitive edge. Accidents, leaks, and lawsuits force a hard break. Public trust retreats for years. Adoption and employment impact projections vary across WEF, McKinsey, and academic indexes such as the Stanford HAI-AI Index. Treat singular numbers with educated distrust because the spreadsheet of the future is always wider than one cell. What varies less is the structure of the problem: tool versus delegation, access versus control, speed versus accountability. No single career is the answer. In each scenario, different mixes of judgment, domain skill, and governance matter more. This channel will not tell you what to study tomorrow morning. It offers the map so you can test your sector. Where is the routine middle? Where is the exception edge? Who signs the error? If you answer those 3, you are already ahead of the hype. And the firm as an institution also has to redesign itself, not only the individual resume. If software gets a login and a KPI, the mental org chart changes even when the formal one lags. Process owners appear who were never people managers, only owners of flows. Automation budgets sit beside headcount budgets. An internal product question shows up: how many agents, with what mandate, under what data policy, and who can kill the process at 2 in the morning? ERP history teaches that integrating systems without redesigning process only digitizes chaos. Agents without redesign do the same, only faster and with a longer trail of side effects. The mature firm, in a sober projection, treats agentic AI as an operations layer, task inventory, risk classification, exception metrics, key rotation, mandatory human review in red zones. None of that is keynote glamour. It is the modern equivalent of cost accounting. And there is a cultural effect. Teams that measure only agent response speed may punish prudence. Teams that measure only safety may smother the gain. The balance is political inside the firm, not only technical. At the limit, the organization that understands agents does not ask, how do I replace the person? It asks, what is the unit of work now? The task, the flow, the outcome, and who is human enough to carry the blame? That sentence sets up the reveal that ties the whole episode. Because what is at stake is not only efficiency, it is the nature of the coworker. Here is the reframe that binds spreadsheet, outsourcing, digital badge, and liability. The agent revolution is not, at root, that machines got smarter at chatting. It is that software stopped being only an instrument in a hand and began to occupy the structural place of a counterpart in the division of labor, an operational entity to which you delegate the middle of the flow. Tool multiplies. Copilot proposes. Counterpart executes under a mandate, and that moves law, psychology, and economics at once. That is why 2026 feels different from another new chatbot. It is not only a better answer, it is another power relation between human and system. The human rises to goal, exception, and blame. The system takes volume and continuity. As with the mechanical loom and the spreadsheet, the bottom task thins and the upper layer densifies. Only now, the lower layer is cognitive and chained, not only manual or arithmetic. The uncomfortable reveal, calling this a digital employee, helps management and misleads the soul. There is no moral subject there. There is process with permissions, a mask that looks like a colleague and behaves like a pipeline. Treating process as a person is the psychological shortcut. Treating a person as disposable process is the ethical risk. The mature map holds both without collapsing one into the other. And if that is true, the close is not a verdict of fear or euphoria. It is a set of stances for living the transition without fooling yourself. Let us land without a prescriptive recipe, only a map. First, separate chatbot from agent. Reply is not execution. Confusing the two breeds the wrong fear and the wrong hope. Second, look at the ladder of tool, copilot, delegation, and ask which rung your job, your team, or your firm is actually on, not the rung the pitch deck claims. Third, remember the spreadsheet and outsourcing. History already showed that automating the middle multiplies volume and shifts value toward judgment, design, and accountability. Fourth, treat access as the real power and error as a cost someone will pay. Password and blame are the same problem in two languages. Fifth, calibrate trust. Fluency is not truth. Sampling is office wisdom. Sixth, pick mentally a scenario in dispute, cautious, selective, or race without a net, and test your sector against it, without treating a consultancy percentage as destiny. AI agents do not end human work. They reopen the old question of who does what, under which mandate, and who signs at the end. 2026 is the opening of a cycle, not a final verdict. Software has begun working alone in the middle of the flow, meaning goals and responsibility remain, for now and by design, on this side. You now have the map. The next step is to decide with clarity what you refuse to delegate. On Nexialist Future, we do not stop at software that thinks. We move to the body that works. If this map of agents helped you, subscribe and continue Cycle 3 with us. Next episode, Humanoids on the Factory Floor, the year robots clocked in. Real shifts, assembly lines, and what happens when the machine not only decides the flow, but occupies the physical space of manual labor. Tell me, If software already contests the middle of the office, what changes when the humanoid contests the factory floor? See you next time.